Saturday mornings are supposed to be peaceful. That's the one time of the week where I allow myself to slow down, step out into the garage and just take in the sight of my Harley. That machine is more than just a bike to me. It's years of saving, sweat, and dedication. The polished chrome isn't just shiny metal, it's my reflection, my pride, my freedom on two wheels. Every time I fire up that engine, it feels like every mile I ride is a reminder of why I worked so hard in the first place. The sound of that V-twin isn't noise. It's music. It's a heartbeat. But of course, not everyone in the neighborhood saw it that way. You see, I live in a neighborhood that should have been perfect. Wide streets, nice homes, kids playing outside, neighbors waving as you drive by. But it's got one fatal flaw. The HOA. And not just any HOA, one run by the woman we all know as Karen. She was the kind of person who weaponized rules, who thought her clipboard was more powerful than the Constitution. She strutted around the neighborhood like she was some sort of sheriff, issuing fines, taping notices to doors, and sending nasty emails at midnight. People tolerated her because they didn't want the hassle. But me? I wasn't wired like that. I believed in standing my ground, and I wasn't about to let anyone tell me I couldn't enjoy what I'd worked hard to own. Now, Karen's son was another story entirely. Picture a young man in his 20s, spoiled rotten, living off his mother's attitude like it was oxygen. He didn't earn a thing in his life but acted like the whole world owed him everything. Loud, arrogant, with the kind of smirk that made you want to wipe it off his face, he strutted through the neighborhood like he was untouchable. Most people ignored him. I didn't. When he opened his mouth, I made sure he knew that not everyone was going to bow down to him or his mother's so-called authority. That put me on his radar. And my Harley? That made me enemy number one. That morning I had just finished polishing the chrome when I heard the flip-flops smacking down the street. I didn't even have to look up to know who it was. There he was, energy drink in hand, sunglasses pushed up on his head like he was starring in some reality show nobody watched. He stopped at the end of my driveway and tilted his head at my bike like it was already his. "Nice Harley," he said with that fake admiration dripping off every word. "Mom says stuff like that isn't really allowed here. HOA rules and all." I didn't even flinch. It's my bike. It's my garage. HOA doesn't tell me what I can ride. He smirked wider. "Actually, I think it would look better with me on it. Why don't you go ahead and hand me the keys?" I thought he was joking at first, but his tone was serious. He genuinely thought he could just demand my Harley and I would roll over and give it to him. The entitlement radiating off this kid was enough to choke a grown man. I leaned back against the workbench, folded my arms and said, "Not a chance. This Harley isn't leaving this garage unless I'm the one riding it." He scowled, then pulled out his phone. "Fine. You'll regret this. I'll call the cops and tell them it's illegal. It's too loud. It's dangerous. The HOA already told you it's not supposed to be here. Let's see what the cops think about you breaking the law." Now, I'm not easily rattled, but I knew his mother's influence with local authorities. She had filed so many petty complaints that dispatch probably had her number memorized. The cops knew her, and while most rolled their eyes at her antics, there were a couple who actually entertained her nonsense just to shut her up. This could get messy and I knew it. But I wasn't about to let him see me sweat. "Go ahead," I said. "Call them. I'll wait." So he did. Right there, in front of me, pacing the driveway and spewing exaggerated nonsense into the phone like he was reporting a crime of national importance. "Yes, officer, he's got a motorcycle that violates noise ordinances. Yes, it's against HOA regulations. Yes, it's disturbing the peace. Yes, I think it might even be stolen." That last part really lit me up inside, but I stayed cool on the outside. He wanted me to blow up. I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. 10 minutes later, 2 cruisers rolled into the street. Lights flashing, tires crunching against the pavement. Karen's son puffed his chest out like he'd just summoned an army. He pointed at me and yelled, "There. That's him. That's the guy with the illegal Harley. It's not allowed here. You need to tow it away. It should be mine." The officers exchanged looks. One of them sighed, clearly realizing what kind of call this was. The other stepped toward me, hands on his belt, eyes scanning the bike. He reached out and rested his palm on the tank, like he was checking to see if it had been hot-wired. Karen's son was bouncing on his heels, grinning ear to ear, waiting for them to slap cuffs on me and roll my Harley onto a tow truck. He had no idea what was really about to happen. Because here's the thing. I knew this day would come. From the moment Karen started sniffing around, complaining about everything from my hedges to the color of my mailbox, I knew she'd eventually set her sights on the Harley. That's why I'd already prepared. And by prepared, I don't mean gathering paperwork or HOA documents. I mean making a phone call of my own. See, I'm not just some guy with a bike. Over the years, through business, through community work, through life, I've made some friends in high places. And one of those friends just happened to be the state attorney. He and I went way back. And when I told him about the way Karen's family was harassing me, how her son was escalating, and how the cops were likely going to be dragged into their nonsense, he told me something that made me smile. Next time they try that, he said, give me a call. I'd like to see it for myself. So when Karen's son started dialing 911, I sent one quick message. A simple text. And less than 15 minutes later, while those two officers were circling my Harley and asking me questions in that practiced cop tone, a black SUV rolled into the street. The moment Karen's son saw it, he froze. His smirk faltered. Because this wasn't just any SUV. It was government-plated. It pulled up slow, steady, and parked right behind the cruisers. The door opened, and out stepped the state attorney himself, in a crisp suit, sunglasses reflecting the morning sun. Now, I wish I could properly describe the look on Karen's son's face at that moment. His jaw dropped. His grip on his energy drink went slack. He started to stammer, trying to piece together what he was seeing. Because in his world, he was the one who called the shots. He called the cops. He pulled the strings. He thought he was about to watch me crumble. Instead, the most powerful attorney in the state was walking straight toward me, hand extended, smiling like an old friend. And that was just the beginning. The air went still as the black SUV door shut with a solid thump. Even the officers straightened up instinctively, their posture changing the moment they recognized who had arrived. The state attorney wasn't the kind of man you ignored, and he wasn't the kind of man who showed up to neighborhood disputes unless there was a very good reason. He adjusted his sunglasses, smoothed his jacket, and walked toward me like he had all the time in the world. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm but commanding. He clasped my hand in a firm handshake, smiled, and nodded toward the Harley gleaming in the sun. "She looks even better in person. I'm glad I finally got to see the famous bike you keep bragging about." The cops blinked, then looked at me, then at him. It took them a second to connect the dots, but when they did, their entire demeanor shifted. No longer were they casually investigating. Now they were on alert, careful, cautious. Because when the state attorney was involved, every word mattered. Karen's son was still standing there, slack-jawed, pointing at me like a kid caught cheating in school. "Wait, what? You know him? He's breaking the law. That motorcycle isn't allowed here. He's disturbing the neighborhood. You can't just..." The state attorney cut him off with a look so sharp it could have sliced steel. "Son, why don't you tell me exactly what law has been broken here?" Karen's son stammered. It's against HOA rules. My mom said it's not allowed. It's too loud. It's a violation." The attorney raised an eyebrow. "HOA rules? That's what this is about. I was under the impression we were dealing with something criminal, given you called the police. Officers, is there a statute under state law that prohibits this gentleman from owning or operating a motorcycle in his own driveway?" The officers exchanged glances, uncomfortable. One cleared his throat. "No, sir. There's no law against it. Noise complaints are handled separately, but this doesn't fall under that category." Karen's son's face turned red. He wasn't expecting pushback, especially not from someone with this much authority. He waved his arms wildly, trying to recover. But the HOA. They already said it's not allowed. You don't understand, my mom runs this neighborhood. She makes the rules." The state attorney actually chuckled, a deep, amused sound that seemed to echo down the street. "Your mother makes the rules? That's interesting. Because last I checked, homeowners associations don't outrank state law. And they certainly don't outrank me." He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice but making sure every word carried weight. "And if you ever call law enforcement again under false pretenses, wasting their time because of a personal grudge or entitlement, you'll be the one in handcuffs." The color drained from the kid's face. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The cops stepped back, clearly relieved that someone else was handling the situation, but also trying to keep their composure as the tension thickened. That's when, right on cue, the front door of Karen's house slammed open. And there she was. Clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, storming down the driveway like she was marching into a courtroom. Her voice carried across the street before she even reached us. "What is going on here? Officers, did you tow the motorcycle yet? Did you issue the fine? This nuisance has been disturbing the peace for months, and I demand you enforce the rules of this community immediately." The attorney turned slowly, watching her approach, his expression unreadable. She didn't recognize him at first. She was too caught up in her own fury, too convinced she was about to steamroll everyone into submission. She jabbed her clipboard toward the Harley, rattling off accusations like bullets from a machine gun. It's illegal. It's unsafe. It's against the bylaws. We voted last month to prohibit loud vehicles. It has to go. If you don't do your job, I'll have your badges. She stopped mid-rant when she noticed the man in the suit wasn't backing away like the others. Instead, he was watching her with the kind of calm patience you only see in people who hold all the cards. She squinted at him, clearly trying to place his face, until finally she demanded, "And who exactly are you supposed to be?" He removed his sunglasses slowly, meeting her gaze with eyes that carried the weight of courtrooms and legal authority. "Ma'am, I'm the state attorney. And I'm here because your son thought it was appropriate to weaponize law enforcement over a motorcycle that is entirely legal." Silence. For the first time in as long as anyone in the neighborhood could remember, Karen didn't have a quick retort. Her mouth opened, then closed again, her face cycling through shock, disbelief, and the dawning horror that she had just walked into a battle she could not win. You're the state attorney?" she stammered. This isn't a state matter. This is an HOA issue. We're allowed to enforce community standards. You have no jurisdiction here." The attorney's lips curled into a small smile. "On the contrary, ma'am. I absolutely do when your HOA starts abusing its power and attempting to use local law enforcement as your personal enforcers. That crosses into legal territory very quickly. Fraudulent complaints, harassment, abuse of authority. All things I take very seriously." The neighbors were starting to gather now, peeking out from behind curtains, stepping onto porches, whispering to one another. They'd all been victims of Karen's crusades at one point or another, fined for ridiculous things like leaving a garden hose out overnight or planting the wrong type of flowers. And now they were seeing justice in real time. Karen tried to recover, waving her clipboard like it was a shield. I'm just doing my job. Keeping this community safe. Everyone agreed to the bylaws when they moved in. I have the right to enforce them." The attorney stepped closer, his presence looming over her like a storm cloud. "What you have the right to do is operate within the law. What you do not have the right to do is harass your neighbors, lie to the police, and attempt to steal property by claiming it violates rules that hold no legal weight. And if you continue down this path, I will personally launch an investigation into your HOA's practices." Her face went pale. Her son, standing behind her, looked like he wanted to melt into the asphalt. The officers were doing their best to stay neutral, but the smirks tugging at their mouths told me they were enjoying every second of this. Then the attorney turned back to me, clapped a hand on my shoulder and said, "Enjoy your Harley. You've earned it. If anyone bothers you again, call me directly." He turned back toward Karen and her son, his voice hardening. "And you too? Consider this your final warning. Step out of line again and you'll answer to me in court." The SUV door opened again and one of his aides stepped out, handing him a file folder. He flipped it open casually, glanced at a few pages, then looked back at Karen with raised eyebrows. "Interesting. It seems your HOA has quite a few financial irregularities. Fines collected without proper accounting. Expenses that don't add up. Missing funds." He snapped the folder shut with a sharp crack. "We'll be in touch." Karen's knees nearly buckled. Her son looked like he was about to faint. The neighbors? They were practically glowing with joy, whispering excitedly, their eyes wide with vindication. For the first time in years, the queen of the HOA and her spoiled heir had been knocked off their thrones. And me? I just leaned back against my Harley, crossed my arms and smiled. Because this battle was far from over. This was only the beginning. After the state attorney's warning, the neighborhood buzzed with a kind of energy I hadn't felt in years. For so long Karen had ruled with fear. She fined people for the pettiest things, shamed them publicly in meetings, and used her son as her loud, obnoxious enforcer. But that day, with the attorney standing tall and calling her out, everything shifted. You could feel it in the air. Neighbors who used to keep their heads down were suddenly whispering to each other with smiles on their faces, trading stories of fines and threats they had endured. It was like a dam had cracked, and all the resentment that had built up over the years was finally spilling out. Karen and her son retreated back to their house that day, faces pale, eyes darting nervously, and for a while the neighborhood was quiet. But people like that don't go down easy. Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat, and her son certainly wasn't ready to give up his false sense of power. I knew this wasn't over. It was just a matter of time before they struck back. Sure enough, the next week I found another notice taped to my door. Bright yellow, bold letters, demanding payment of a fine for vehicular violations. According to the paper, my Harley was classified as a prohibited vehicle under emergency HOA amendments. It was laughable but also infuriating. She hadn't learned a thing. I crumpled the notice and tossed it aside, then made a call to the state attorney's office. His response was calm but sharp. Good. Let her keep digging. Every false fine, every illegal notice, every threat, it builds the case. We'll use it all. So I waited. And in the meantime, I started hearing more and more from my neighbors. Mrs. Thompson from across the street showed me a stack of fines she'd received over the years, everything from her bird feeder being too close to the sidewalk, to her porch lights being the wrong wattage. Another neighbor revealed that Karen's son had actually threatened to have his car towed if he didn't move it from a public street, claiming the HOA owned the roadway. Parents admitted she'd banned kids from riding bikes in certain parts of the neighborhood because she thought they were too noisy. Every story was worse than the last, and every story made people angrier. The attorney's office was busy too. His investigators started quietly visiting neighbors, asking questions, gathering documents, building a picture of just how corrupt this HOA had become under Karen's rule. And all the while, Karen acted like nothing was wrong, strutting around with her clipboard, barking at people, and sending emails filled with threats of more fines and more penalties. Her son got louder too, revving his car late at night, blaring music, making snide comments whenever he saw me working on my Harley. He thought intimidation would scare me. But it only made me more determined. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. It was a warm evening. The sun was just dipping low, painting the sky orange and pink. I had the Harley out in the driveway, tinkering with a few adjustments, when suddenly I heard shouting. Karen's son was storming up the street again, but this time he wasn't alone. He had a couple of his friends with him, loud, rowdy, and looking for trouble. They marched right up to my driveway and stopped a few feet away, their eyes locked on my bike. "This is it," Karen's son sneered. "I'm done waiting. You're not supposed to have this here. Either you hand me the keys or I'll make sure this bike is gone by tonight. Cops or no cops." His friends laughed, egging him on, clearly ready to back him up if things got physical. But before I could respond, headlights lit up the street. A line of cars was rolling in, unmarked, quiet, serious. Doors opened, and out stepped men and women in suits with badges clipped to their belts. At the front of the group, the state attorney himself. The timing couldn't have been better. He walked straight up the driveway, ignoring the kid and his friends, and turned to me. "It's time," he said simply. Then he turned to face Karen's son. "You're about to witness the consequences of your mother's corruption." Karen herself appeared moments later, rushing out of her house, shouting at the top of her lungs. "What is going on here? You can't just storm into this neighborhood without my approval. I'm the president of this HO." The attorney held up a folder thick with papers. "Correction. You were the president of this HOA. Effective immediately, this association is under investigation for fraud, harassment, and misuse of funds. We have evidence of thousands of dollars in unaccounted fines, unlawful enforcement of fake bylaws, and attempts to intimidate residents using police resources. And it all leads back to you." Her face went ghost white. Her son's jaw fell open. The neighbors, drawn out by the commotion, were gathering fast, forming a crowd. Some had phones out, recording. Others whispered excitedly, watching their longtime tormentor get cornered. "This is outrageous." Karen screeched. "You can't do this. I'm in charge here. You have no authority over an HOA." The attorney's voice was ice. "Ma'am, I have authority over fraud. I have authority over harassment. And I have authority over the misuse of law enforcement resources. And let me make this crystal clear. You are done. Your HOA has been dissolved effective this evening. Your accounts are frozen. And as for you, you'll be answering questions downtown." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen staggered back, clutching her clipboard like it could save her, her son yelling protests that grew weaker with each passing second. The officers who had been summoned earlier now stepped in, not for me, not for my Harley, but for her. They read her rights right there in front of everyone. Karen's son lunged forward, shouting, "You can't do this. This neighborhood belongs to us." The attorney turned on him, sharp as a blade. "The only thing you belong to now is an investigation. You filed a false police report, attempted to coerce your neighbor into handing over private property, and interfered with officers doing their jobs. You're lucky you're not in cuffs right beside your mother." The crowd erupted. Cheers, applause, relieved laughter. Years of frustration poured out as people clapped and shouted words like, "Finally," and "About time." The power Karen had held over everyone shattered in an instant, replaced by something stronger, unity. As Karen was led away, screaming about how none of this was legal, her son slinking behind her like a beaten dog, the attorney turned back to me. He placed a hand on the Harley's seat and smiled. "This bike stays right where it is. You've got nothing to worry about." I nodded, grateful but also humbled. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone Karen had bullied and intimidated. The attorney knew it too. He addressed the neighbors directly, his voice carrying through the night. "You don't have to live under fear anymore. This HOA has been abusing its power for too long, but tonight that ends. There will be a new system, one that actually serves the community instead of preying on it." The cheers grew louder. Neighbors hugged each other, some even crying with relief. The tension that had strangled the neighborhood for years dissolved like smoke in the wind. Later that night, as the crowd dispersed and the last of the officials packed up their files, I stood beside my Harley and took a deep breath. The engine gleamed under the streetlight, and for the first time in a long time I felt free. Free from Karen. Free from her spoiled son. Free from the fake rules and the endless threats. The next morning when I fired up the Harley and rode down the street, no one complained. No one frowned. Instead, people waved. Kids cheered. Neighbors smiled. The sound of the engine wasn't a nuisance anymore. It was a victory cry. Because in the end, it wasn't just about a motorcycle. It was about standing up, refusing to be bullied, and proving that no matter how loud or entitled someone might be, the law, and the truth, still carry more weight than any clipboard or empty threat. And as for Karen and her son? Let's just say the neighborhood hasn't missed them one bit. If you enjoyed this crazy HOA showdown, don't forget to like the video, hit that subscribe button, and drop a comment below about what you would have done in my shoes. Your support helps me bring even more wild stories your way.